You're back in Ukraine now. You're back in Ukraine. How long have you been back?
I've been back in Ukraine really for like 2 weeks. I just got right back into Ukraine and went back to the front, just got back from the front, literally in the last 24 hours. So, you know, I still got to take a shower, and it's going to be nice, a nice warm shower. I'm excited for that.
How did that go? You said you were out there. How long were you out there for?
I was out there for about a week. I was on the Pokrovsk axis. I went to Pokrovsk, went to Pokrovsk City. I embedded with the Leopard team, and I embedded with Skval again, because I'm really interested in the prisoner soldiers. So just released a video on the prisoner soldiers. I don't know if you saw it, but it was an embed with these people recruited from the prison system who signed contracts, basically saying they would serve with the armed forces for the entirety of the war in exchange for their record, not being expunged, but them being able to be allowed out of the prison system. They're basically fighting for their personal freedom. That really interested me. Released a video about it. We got some connections from that video, and so we went to a training center because they're also fighting in the Pokrovsk area, and we wanted to know about the situation from their perspective. And we met a military trainer there that had a lot of knowledge, and it's a good interview.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out. You also had your drone safari that you're covering in Kherson. How's that going still? Are you still covering that?
Well, yeah, we released the documentary on the human safari in Kherson, and we pointed out a lot of obvious trends of record of targeting civilians, targeting civilian transport buses, targeting fire department vehicles, firefighters, targeting medical personnel, targeting civilians. And as we can see from recent reports, which just came out of Bilopila, which is a village in the Sumy Oblast, where I interviewed the mayor back in the day, for Offbeat Research. I released an article with them talking about how, it's affecting the village over there. And he was also in my documentary, in the Sumy documentary, talking about the fear of the war coming back to Sumy and talking about the bombing and how it's affected civilians there. And there was a lot of civilian damage there, but this recent bombing of this civilian transport vehicle in the city is a tragedy. I mean, it's all civilians killed, all civilians wounded. It's a clear civilian transport vehicle. And to be clear, these transport vans are all across Ukraine. If the Russians know anything about Ukraine, the country they claim to know so much about, they would know that these types of vans from every village in the country, you get in these vans to like go from there to major city areas if you're just trying to get around. And so they knew what they were doing. So, I mean, and they went a terrible distance to do the strike too. It's not like Bilopila is right there. So they went a distance. I mean, they used a Lancet on it. It's not like, oh, it's an FPV, it's $1,000. They invested a terrible amount of money to kill these civilians in Bilopila, and it's an absolute atrocity.
Absolutely. And speaking of that, we here in the United States, all we're hearing is about Istanbul and a peace, and Putin announced a ceasefire. Is there a ceasefire, Dylan?
I was on the Pokrovsk axis the day the ceasefire was supposed to kick in from this 30-day ceasefire demand that the West has been pushing, that the Ukrainians was pressured with aid cuts and everything else to try to get them to agree to, and they agreed to it. And I was there when it was supposed to be in effect, and I know it wasn't in effect because I was woken by glide bombs. So, I mean, yeah, it was not in effect. The bombing in the area, one of the villages we were staying in before we went into Pokrovsk City, which, I mean, it is a corpse. The city is a corpse, and the Russians are burning the corpse. It's not even a question of murdering the city. There are roughly like 2,000 to the highest estimate I heard is 4,000, but I don't believe that, really. I think it's down to the 2,000 estimate that I heard more recently. So, but I mean, when I was in one of the outside villages, they bombed the water system, and we weren't able to get water for a bit, so I had to bathe with a cup, and it was, enjoyable.
Yeah, I just did a map update of Pokrovsk. I'm not you're on the ground. Is that reflective of what we're seeing? We're kind of in the map update. We just saw Russians are gaining ground in the highway or the road between Mirnograd and Kupiansk. And then also to the southwest of Pokrovsk. Are the Russians gaining ground there, or is it still kind of static, being fought back and forth?
I mean, the area in Pokrovsk in the city, because I didn't go to the contact line. I was in the city. which, I mean, of course, FPV,
Yeah.
and, you know, artillery, the war is still there, but I wasn't there seeing like any of these positions being taken, so I can't speak for that.
Okay.
What I can speak for is just, yes, the Russians are still trying to advance. Yes, the Russians are still attacking. Yes, the Russians are slamming everything with artillery fire, mortar fire, grad rocket fire. When we were in there, we had a grad rockets hit really close to our position, and the ceiling started falling to parts of it started falling on me. Some of it caught in my eye, and it was kind of hard to shoot for the rest of the day because it had dust in my eye. But there was, of course, glide bombs, and the FPVs were just constant. And I've been FPVs have been always constant on the front, Mercado. I know you, when you were near the front line, you probably had to see like some drones, but it's not comparable anymore. It's not comparable to that. They're everywhere.
Wow.
When we were trying to we had 5 failed evacuations on trying to get out of the city because of the constant FPV presence. On the pathway into the city, we had to divert because of FPVs. On the pathway out of the city, on the 6th attempt, after 5 false starts, to be clarified, it was 5 false starts. On the 6th attempt, we still had to, after passing these burning buildings that had been hit by, I believe, glide bombs. It was a surreal scene. We had to park on the side because of the FPV presence. They are constant. And because they are using more and more fiber optic cables, the jamming is becoming more difficult. It's not a fix-all, end-all. And so far, there has not been a alternative proposed. I mean, people are talking about like intercepting drones to take out other drones. Of course, there's the shotgun, and you know that's something that every team should have reliable and on hand. But right now, there's so much fiber optic cables over the city. It's like the world's worst fisherman went in there and just went to town 24/7 because there's just like lines everywhere. I remember the first time I saw it, the first thought I had in my mind was, oh, it was like Christmas tinsel. I'm having so much of it like hitting me in the face.
That is just wild. So the Russians have caught up on the FPVs, and they have fiber optic drones too, like Ukraine.
Oh, they have tons of fiber optic drones. They have tons and tons of fiber optic drones. The Ukrainians have fiber optic drones. I went there, and I remember we had to move like 500 meters to meet Lobster, which is an FPV pilot we've embedded with a few times. He's an interesting guy. I watched him last embed kill a man in a toilet wearing a Hello Kitty patch on his arm. So just like I never thought I would. I mean, it was a very surreal scene. The like Hello Kitty merchandise placement is probably not going to be in the company's favor. I don't think they want to sponsor the video or anything, but it was a very surreal scene, and I wanted to go talk to him again. So we had to move like 500 meters on the surface, and moving took like an hour just to get like 500 meters because we had to take cover so many times because of FPV presence. And it wasn't just like you hearing them, which, you know, they sound like a small swarm of bees. I could see them. I could see the FPVs flying between the buildings, flying over the buildings that we need to cross, getting under the trees. And so, I mean, the FPV presence is constant, and the Russians have a lot of fiber optic drones too.
Besides the increase of the FPV usage by the Russians that you've been seeing and experiencing firsthand, is there any other warfare capabilities you've seen or increase or decrease?
Increase or decrease? I mean, there's less constant artillery than what I used to see earlier in the war back in 2022. In 2022, there was much more artillery than there is now. Even with all the North Korean imports, and I'm saying they make up 40% or 50%. I don't know the percentage, okay? I don't read them when they're coming down. I'm sorry. But, you know, it's very fast. But these artillery bombardments just don't have as many shells as they used to. Now, there's, of course, the glide bomb presence, I think, is about as constant as it was before. The position next to ours, I'm not going to say when, but a position next to ours had been hit by a glide bomb very relatively recently, to give it a time frame, and the whole building crashed down. And a lot of these teams are working all across the city in like basements or in secluded areas. And, you know, when those glide bombs hit, there's not really a way to like get away from that because the whole building will collapse in on you if you're in the basement, where, you know, an artillery shell, mortar shell there, or grad rocket fire, FPV, you can hide from it there. So there's a strategy for survival. But if the whole building collapses on you, man, you're screwed. So, you know, that's still as much of a bummer as it was when I was with the drone teams in Lipsies or anywhere else. Let's say that's basically the same.
My goodness, it's a reality that most people don't understand, and that's why I crash out here back home in the U.S. when people talk about peace and peace and peace, and Russia is just absolutely not about that whatsoever. They never have been. So what are ways that, you know, you also do streams in which you kind of just react and talk about the news as well as you're directly involved in firsthand reporting. What are ways you relay to your audience about people that are talking about peace in Ukraine and we got to find a way for diplomacy, and then you yourself are literally experiencing the Russians like, nope, we're not doing peace. We're actually just going to keep killing people. What is the message there? Like, how do you relay the realities of what's happening to your audience or a general audience?
Look, if you're trying to talk down a psychopath, right? You're somebody stabbing you and you want to talk them down because you think that would be a better way to resolve the situation. Okay, you can attempt that. You can attempt to say, hello, sir, could we please stop for one moment? But during that process, you should not just like patiently wait for him to respond, and you need to defend yourself. You need to do something. And it would be one thing if we were approaching this with a ever increasing amount of pressure meant to facilitate them coming to the table, which is what Trump, if you were to genuinely try to decode a policy outcome from what he was prescribing, said he wanted to do to bring the Russians to the table. If his, which was often questioned, just walk into the room, immediately bring a peace deal out of existence through his friendship and negotiating, strengths, wasn't going to pan out. He said he was going to increase the pressure. That has not happened. We've seen a $50 million arms sale to Ukraine, and that's it. I mean, the Ukrainians said they would pay for, air defense systems. And when I think about that from the Trumpian perspective, you should be able to come out and say, look, I'm now making America no longer scammed. They're paying. We're making money. Americans are getting jobs. I'm not getting scammed like Biden. And I'm delivering on this promise of increasing pressure. And it would genuinely make the Russians think, okay, maybe there'll be a way to facilitate the war, bet more in Ukraine's favor. It might actually have the intended effect. It's not impossible that if you actually made the Russians think you were going to sell them $50 billion, $60 billion worth of arms, that would be reciprocated in some resource deal, or whatever he wants, Trump Tower in Kiev, what would make him happy. Because that's apparently what the Syrians needed to offer, or whatever they needed to offer to get this deal. Okay. And then you can maybe actually bring about a peace, because the current strategy is dragging out the war. He's being dragged around. The reason the Russians are doing it this way is to buy time for a summer offensive, because they want to take Konstantinivka, they want to take Pokrovsk, they want to take the rest of the lands. Taking Kramatorsk and taking Sloviansk, maybe they would like to negotiate away having to fight those battles, because Kramatorsk is a very dense city, and Sloviansk is a very long city. If anybody's ever driven into Sloviansk, its urban density is over an extended area, and so fighting urban battles to try to take those places, if you're unable to flank them, is going to be a big problem. There hasn't been any urban battle like that yet in the fight for Donetsk. They're the last fortress cities of the war, so maybe they would like to avoid that through negotiating some deal in which they try to push Ukraine out of these regions, which is what they're attempting to do, but the Ukrainians aren't going to accept that. So you need to make terms that the Ukrainians would be willing to accept, and that is legally acceptable in Ukraine, because you can't reform your territorial boundaries without the Rada's approval, and the Rada is not going to approve not only giving up territory, but also giving up territory not conquered and signing it away constitutionally, which is what the Russians are demanding. Not to mention like the continued demands of demilitarization. Yeah. So the only way, even if you have a Trumpian perspective of we just need to end the war, I don't really care if Ukraine gets all of its territory back, the only way is still to add pressure to the Russians, because the Russians won't take a good deal when offered. And the deal that Trump has offered them is decently good, which is the legalization of one of their annexations, at least from the American perspective, as well as basically de facto control of a bunch of territories as long as the ceasefire is going on, which could be extended into a peace deal. He said he was going to negotiate for some of their territory back at the start of it, but he never really attempted to, and that's still not a good enough deal for the Russians. The Russians were here for the, their same team that they sent in 2022. They come forward and tell the Ukrainians the negotiations, and we're hearing this from the Financial Times, and the Russians have confirmed this, that they did say this, that they are demanding them to withdraw from the territories here, saw in the same place that they're doing the human safari. And then when the Ukrainians denied doing that, And, the Trump administration has not told them to do that. Witkoff has suggested it as a bad option, but Trump has not said that is the policy.
Yeah.
They then responded to say, oh, we'll do 5 regions next time. And then when they went on state TV, they said it was 8 regions, not 5 regions. It was 8 regions on Russian state TV, and that was the correction they put forward. Now, whether or not it was 8 regions, whether or not it was 5 regions, the point was they were either threatening Sumy, the place where they just killed all the civilians in that transport bus. So we're going to know the treatment that community could receive as the war probably goes forward, is more of that as the fighting goes into the Sumy region if they attempt an invasion, or somewhere like Kharkiv where they're already fighting over Kupiansk, they're trying to get closer to the city, and they, of course, have their previous incursions into Volchamsk and Lipsy, which got bogged down. But if they take their resources from Kursk and continue with these 30,000 manpower recruitments every month, they could presumably continue with summer offensives, choosing to concentrate it somewhere, whether it be Pokrovsk, whether it be in Kharkiv, or if they spread it across the whole line under the continued philosophy of somewhere they will eventually break, just push everywhere. I don't know. But the point is that it seems clear to me that they're preparing for a summer offensive. I'm not the only person saying this. I'm not some man looking like for a genie right here in some lamp, or they're giving me some magic knowledge. No, it's just pretty clear from everything that anyone's hearing. So the question is whether or not Trump can put the gun barrel of further aid, further weapon sales, strengthening of actual secondary sanctions. And he threatened something that would have a real effect, a strong effect. And maybe if he wanted to dodge actually pulling the trigger on this, he shouldn't have actually said that. And I think now that he's realized how actual big of a commitment that would be, he's kind of scared of pulling the trigger on secondary sanctions. So he continues to keep the can down the road because he doesn't want to tell all these Chinese companies or these companies or that companies, because it could actually have some market effect in a time right now where he's actually already disturbed the market because of his 60-front trade war. Because, that's what he decided to do. Yeah. But now stirring up more economic chaos at the moment when he's already pulling so bad on the economy, I think in my opinion, I think he's staring down the barrel of something that he now has cornered himself on. And so now in this Brett Baer interview where he's basically confronting him, like, okay, Putin has disrespected everything you put forward. He's just like, we got to sit down and talk. If you sit down and talk after putting this on the table, then you're abiding by the same philosophy that got this trade war started, okay? I want to see if this is the trade philosophy, like you shoot and ask questions later once you've showed your intentions, put some secondary sanctions on, sign a $30 billion weapons sale over to Ukraine, or $40 billion. It doesn't need to be the biggest amount in order to actually win the war. Do a Biden size, whatever, just something, anything, literally, so that when you sit down there, he's not thinking, this guy does not give a fuck, which is what he thinks right now.
Absolutely. I mean, 100%. Were you able to look at the deal between, or the direct peace talks between Russia and Ukraine yet? You were on the front line, so I don't know if you've been able to look at the Istanbul talks.
I've been able to read enough of the notes to hear what the demands were. They were the same demands that they made back in 2022 when they controlled much more territory. They controlled the city of Kherson. They no longer control the city of Kherson. It's the only regional capital they control for the whole war. They control like 27% of the country, or 23%. I forget the exact percentage. Point is, now they control roughly over 18%. Over the last 2 years, they went from 17.5, 17.8% to 18.3%. This has been the change in territorial controls. But I mean, compared to what they had before, the demands should not stay the same. It doesn't make sense to me. And so freezing the lines where they are is, I think, very generous terms, considering what the Russians have done. And so them demanding more territory to be given without a fight, especially considering what they're doing, they knew the Ukrainians were going to reject it. That's why they sent the low-level mediators who went in there and talked about, we'll fight you forever. We fought Sweden for 21 years. And, did all those types of, they talked about maybe some of your loved ones will die in this war as it continues. They say that to the negotiators. They do this because they knew it was going to fail, or was extremely likely to fail, almost certain it was going to fail. And that's why Putin didn't go, because he didn't want to be directly associated with this failure. He'd rather the goons be directly associated with this failure, so he continued to kick the can down the road and make Trump hopeful that maybe there's an alternative option for as long as possible to either delay American aid for more than 100 days, which is what has been done so far, or to, stop it entirely if either of those options are possible. But either way, it benefits him, whether they delay aid for half a year, whether they stop aid altogether. Either option benefits him for a summer offensive, which is coming. And I'm telling you, I've talked to armored crews. They don't have the parts. They don't have the parts. They need the parts to replace their equipment. I mean, to replace, damaged tracks, to replace this part here, this part there. And, they have some flow. The Europeans are providing what they can, but the United States could really do a lot to plug the gap right now in advance of this offensive, and then put us in a much better negotiating position. Because right now, it's the fact that they think that they can push on that is stopping us from sitting down at the table and even accepting a status quo, let alone their maximalist position.
Do you foresee anything favorable to Ukraine for the United States coming up here before this summer offensive? I mean, like you said, Trump seemingly just is kicking the can down the road. It seems like he's in over his head, or at least is what Steve Witkoff is.
I think this Mondays should be. I mean, I keep saying like this should be the big deciding one. This should be the big deciding one. But a meeting between Putin and Trump just leading to another wave of fucking bullshit is not going to look good. If it's another, we have the same demands, he's going to want to shift this in some way, or really pull the plug on this and disengage. So I think this upcoming Monday, which is when Putin, Trump, and Zelensky, he's supposed to have a call with both. Maybe that will be the big decider. There could be a follow-up where he says, okay, now we need to have a meeting with all of us three in the same room. And then that could be the next big one, because that would make some logical sense. So maybe that'll extend into the week, and it'll push that meeting to Wednesday or Thursday or Friday. Again, pushing it down the road a little bit more. But I think in the near future, once they start meeting in person all together in this manner, we should hopefully have some idea if Trump's just going to completely disengage. Trump is going to put more pressure on the Ukrainians and ask them to give up Kherson, ask them to give up Zaporizhia, which are going to be unconscionable demands. The Ukrainians will never, ever repatriate. The Ukrainians will react to, I think, with hostility. And I think it'll be a diplomatic disaster for the United States to say that, because I think immediately the mainstream press is going to have to pay more attention to what's happening with the human safari, as we're demanding them to literally cede land that they couldn't take because of river crossings, to cede land that if the Russians had would be having a crossing over the Dnieper, which is the strongest natural defensive line that Ukraine has. It makes no sense to do that, but Trump might. Then again, the other alternative is that he'll finally realize that the Russians are still demanding, more territory, they're still demanding XYZ. And so therefore, we're going to actually have to do something. And so he'll implement sanctions and probably do weapon sales. I don't foresee him doing any aid packages, and then he can sell this as a great victory because he sold weapons to the Ukrainians, and then he'll talk about it like the javelins, like he's the hero,
right?
Even though this whole process, like this delay, is having an effect.
Exactly.
I mean, some of it is not even stuff that it's going to hurt America's pocketbook. The decommissioned Australian tanks that were blocked, that's maliciousness. That's maliciousness in the idea that I can't continue to send aid to Ukraine because you've actually convinced yourself that a continued inflow of anything to Ukraine is going to piss off the Russians to such a capacity that negotiations will necessarily fail, even though, of course, you negotiate from a position of strength, not a position of weakness. That's something that they claim to believe, or they believe that they generally just want to screw the Ukrainians into a position where maybe they'll accept something weaker.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, my fear, and that's something I'm going to accept immediately. I think that the easier explanation for me is just like whatever Trump thinks is going to make him look better or make more money, whether it is making a deal with the Russians and normalization, which is, I think, something he wants. And, of course, I think it looks like a Nobel Peace Prize. This is what I want. It's hard to read Trump's intentions. I think it'll be whatever is best for him in the moment, which if that can be supporting Ukraine, then that's the best case scenario.
Yeah, hopefully, maybe Putin pisses him off because Putin isn't his dictator friend he thought he was, because he's not going to listen to him or do a quid pro quo with Trump. and then that will push Trump to support Ukraine.
He can't, like, come on, you gotta just take what you got, okay? Just take what you got, man. You got enough. Come on, man. We want to make normalization. We can't get the Ukrainians to give up here, son. Don't make me look bad. And then he's like,
some mafia meeting or whatever that they do.
You gotta do something. Might as well make money off the Ukrainians. That's what I think the mineral deal is. And then
that's what I think too.
He has an escape hatch.
Yeah.
if the other option doesn't work.
You had mentioned take parts. I'm not going to keep you because you got to get some sleep and all that. Are you doing a stream tonight too? Or are you doing all that? Or? You've been
my friend, my comedian / journalist friend invited me to his silly podcast, so I'm going to be doing that after.
Oh, fun.
But I should also be watching some boxing tonight because the White Rhino is going to be fighting Fisher, and I want to watch that fight because I watched the first one and it was great.
Oh yeah, you're still busy. Look at Dylan going strong. A final question or two. You had mentioned tank parts that are really needed out there right now in the front lines. What here in the States and some of the fundraisers, people have been focusing on drones. Is drones what's most needed? I know this is a common question. It happens all the time, but what Ukraine needs?
Night vision is something that people would be useful, like night vision gear for drones or night vision gear just for the crews. Night vision is something that, is pretty high price. And so for a lot of the units, I think that'd be beneficial. The units also need drones. Yes, they need drone parts. They just more capacity for drones. There's such a high ceiling for how many drones this country could produce. There's such a high ceiling and has not been fully exploited. So yes, I think like more money for drones is always something that the armed forces would appreciate. What else is there? I mean, drone detectors. I mean, I am trying to get a drone detector right now because I've come to the conclusion that if I don't get a drone detector, I think the odds of me dying are going up substantially. So I'm getting a drone detector in the near future. So, I mean, drone detectors are pretty important too. But I mean, hey, if you guys can donate like a bunch of tanks, if anybody has a tank in their garage, you can send over, that'd be useful too.
Pretty soon you're going to be like a cyber reporter with your drone pack on you, your maybe, I don't know, whatever else.
21st century. Yeah. Man. I'm gonna be having like I'm gonna get like Look, okay, if I get some type of radiation sickness, at least I didn't get taken out by an FPV. Okay, I'd prefer the bed.
Yeah, radiation sickness, that's slow and long and painful, right?
Yeah, that doesn't sound good.
Well, all right. So besides, so what Ukraine needs, what do you have coming next? What's your next project? You just put out a video. I'll check it out personally. Some people in chat are already saying that they've seen it and it's great. But what's your next project? And then also shout that out again.
Yeah. We released a documentary on Skval, which is the the prisoner soldiers that have signed contracts. It's on my channel, DylanBurnsLIVE. Next is going to be an air defense documentary where I embedded with air defense teams in the Sumy region. And we got some pretty interesting interviews. We got their perspective. Most of them are Sumy locals, which I think is interesting. We got footage of a downed Shaheed. We got footage of them firing at Shaheeds. We've got, I basically slept with them for like 4 or 5 days, like slept in the barracks with them and, was in the, trying to just film as much of their daily activities as I could. And then, after that, it's going to be my Pokrovsk documentary. Mm-hmm. So I think that's going to be probably one of the big ones of this year.
Yeah, I want to
one of my big 2 ones.
I'm for sure seeing that.
One, 2, or 3 big ones I'm going to produce this year.
You just filmed this Pokrovsk footage like recently, or was this?
Well, I filmed footage from before.
Oh, I see.
All the way to today.
Okay, so I'm watching.
This is basically, I have footage with grad teams in front of Soldovi. I have footage with artillery teams behind Soldovi, right after Soldovi fell. I have interviews with soldiers who were there and explained while Soldovi fell. A lot of them will also fall, these prisoner soldier guys. I've got footage of tons of refugees fleeing, soldiers training to head to Pokrovsk, multiple FPV embeds in Pokrovsk, footage with like assault infantry, going to position stuff. So I've got a big documentary I've been working on because I've been concentrating on the Pokrovsk area for a while now. And so I think I filmed the end of it. And so unless I get some big offer to do something else or there's a big change, then I think I'm going to release it as is. Mm-hmm. Maybe, if there's a new development, I'll go back and revisit it. But I have like well over a year's worth of footage. So I think I would like to put that together into something.
Absolutely. Well, Dylan, it was great talking with you, great chatting with you. I'll let you get a rest before all your big plans today. Your boxing, and then you got another show that you're going to be a part of. How can people follow you? How can they support your work?
People can follow me probably on the street. But if you don't do that and you don't just like hand me money on the street,
don't go follow Dylan on the street, guys, unless you have money.
Please do. Please do. Please bother me when I'm with my friends and family. I enjoy that every time. Every time. Now, but if you want to support me, you can support me at Dylan Burns TV on my YouTube channel. By just subscribing, hit the notification bell, because YouTube hates war content, anything that covers conflict journalism or anything that covers the war, because a lot of it can be pretty graphic, or a lot of I don't censor the soldiers, and press officers don't like me for that sometimes, but I publish every time they say everything, and YouTube sometimes doesn't like that because they can translate, they know what the other languages are. But besides that, you can also support me at DylanBurns.tv. That's my website where people can donate. Every single dime you throw at me, every single dollar you throw at me goes towards embeds, gas costs, fixer costs. I have a cameraman now, so now we're getting multiple camera angles. We have a full studio that produces like folk music for my documentaries. This last documentary, we have a remaking of an old song about two partisans breaking out of prison as the intro for our prisoner documentary. We're trying to add some, a little bit of symbolism and Ukrainian culture. The Ukrainian language is being suppressed, so I think we need to promote it. So if you guys could support me and my work, I'd greatly appreciate it. And if you would just go check out my documentaries, I appreciate that the most.
Of course. Dylan, thank you so much for your time. Can't wait to talk again.
Thank you. Oh, right, I also stream sometimes. DylanBurnsLIVE.
You do that. You are a streamer. You do that as well. All right, buddy.
I stream every once in a while. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Dylan, you guys. Dylan Burns, good chat. He does a little stream here and there. I'm coming back. There we are. He does a little stream.